Hello, and welcome to another fully live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today I have our good cryptozoology expert, Michael, here to help me answer any hacking-related questions you might have. So we are live on the Hack5 channel as well as the Security Forward channel, and Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, of course.
So Alex is in the process of a move, so he is off doing other things at the moment, but we have Michael happy to sit in and answer some questions that we'll be receiving in the chat, as well as some questions that we've gotten on the YouTube channel over the last couple of days. So if you have a question, make sure to drop it in the chat, and also hello to everybody in the chat. I can see everyone, and it's good to see some of our regulars.
I was going to say, I see you, James Randolph, playing with the Restream bot. Leave it alone. What did it do to you?
All right, so every week we also like to check in and just talk a little bit about what we are doing personally. I do a lot of research, I do a lot of other things, and one of the things I've been working on this week is some engineering stuff, which I'm terrible at. So getting to do something that I don't normally get to do. If you look at my page, we've been trying to solve the problem of the flash button on the Nugget. So the Nugget is an attack platform that was recently featured on The Verge, and we are making into an official Hack5 tool. And the USB Nugget has one problem. It really is hard to press this little flash button in here, which is necessary if you're going to be flashing new firmware to it. Now, if you're just using it as a tool, you probably won't need to get to this button. But for us developers, it is very annoying to not have a way to press this button. So I decided to make a case update that will actually allow you to do this. So I started out with this cutout, but unfortunately, this kind of weakened the case and caused it to bow out by creating a weak spot here. So instead, I went ahead and used this. I don't know if anybody else has ever used this weird tool. It's called Matter Control. So this is like the worst 3D modeling software ever. I found it just randomly, and I just made a shape, cut out a hole, and I kind of was also basing this on a really excellent book I've been reading called Open Circuit. So this is one of the frames from Open Circuits. It's a book where somebody like cuts in half all these circuits and explains what all the parts are. And a lot of them have to have like tension or clips or other things, like creating a circuit and being able to bend or flex a little bit. So originally, I went ahead and just made like a button like this that went up, and there was no clip on the bottom. But the problem is, this is one of the prototypes right here, is it sounds like this. Very like rattly. So because it added so much noise to the product, I realized that if I was going to add something to this cool educational platform we've been working on, then I needed to add some sort of like clip or something to let it have a little bit of tension. So this was my end design. This long clip here kind of sits against the button, and the end result is, this is the newer prototype. It doesn't rattle anymore, but you can still press the very top, and it allows you to click the button. So if you were one of the people that's helped support us by picking up one of these nuggets and you want to see how this works, I'm going to be releasing the file soon. And I think in the future, this or a design kind of similar to this is going to be our default in the future. So fun little update that I got to do. And again, I don't really do a lot of 3D modeling. So being able as a beginner to just decide to take the original case and do a remix to add this button is probably going to help a lot of people who want to use this for CircuitPython or flashing things other than the default software. So that was a fun thing to do over the weekend. Also, Twitter's falling apart. So some people might be watching this on Twitter or Periscope or whatever the combination is.
I think it's Twitter now.
Yeah. Yeah, I have noticed that it is now not possible to download your social data, like or your like account archive. Usually it will prepare an archive for you within 24 hours, but I did this like 48 hours ago, and it looks like other people are seeing the same problem. Also, they turned off the microservice that does 2FA. So if you log into Twitter and you use like a text-based 2FA, then it no longer sends that text message. I found this myself yesterday when I was trying to download my Twitter archive. Fortunately, I actually had email set up, but yeah, if you didn't have email set up as a two-factor, then you would no longer be able to access your Twitter account, which is obviously not good. So lots of things going on at Twitter. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to this picture that somebody sent us in of their nuggets that they got for our spooky Halloween special. Nice. One of these nuggets looks like Grimace, and it's this one. And that is so cute. So I just wanted to say, I see this nugget picture. It is super adorable, and I love this case combination, especially right here. The Grimace nugget, that is by far my favorite one.
Cool. So we do have some questions if you're ready to start.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So what makes a good hacker? I'm guessing like qualities and traits.
So like, I'm going to assume this means like what makes a good hacker within like hacker culture, not what makes a good technical hacker. Because like, the best hacker at the NSA might not be like a community person. And like when I think of a hacker, I think of someone who's like involved in the community, who is like very interested in a particular area, but is also very sharing of that information. So like hackers tend to understand that they're never going to be the biggest expert on every subject, and that they also do have something to contribute. So by pairing those two qualities and sharing information with others while at the same time specializing in whatever really, really interests you and whatever scratches that itch in your brain that makes you really want to like dive deep and become an expert on something, yeah, that would be the way to become a good hacker, is to be a part of the community, share your knowledge with other people, and just understand that you're never going to be the absolute best at everything, but you do have something to contribute to the conversation at large. And being a part of the hacker community, I think, is a very important, very good thing. If you meant on a technical level, then please let me know, and I'll
well, I was going to say kind of similar vein, but like, yeah, I think you have to be like almost obsessively focused on like one topic, and I think that leads to really good technical hackers. They'll be limited in scope to like one area, but they'll know that area really well. So what is it, Matty Van Hoff with like Wi-Fi, for instance, or Patrick Wardle with Mac OS. Like it, if you're really passionate about this one tight area, and like that's how you spend your evenings for fun, just researching and exploring, and you're willing to try weird stuff and break computers, I think that's what leads to ultimately like the most skilled hackers.
So here's a good question from LinkedIn. As offensive hacking becomes more popular, does that lead to greater zero-day attacks, quantity, and impact? So what's really interesting, and we report on this on the news stream that we do a lot, there's a whole cybercrime ecosystem that involves small players that might have highly specific skills like SIM swappers, and then people who will buy that information from them that they've already kind of taken care of to use either zero-day exploits on, or even really common exploits if the people in the beginning have done the work of sorting out vulnerable systems or finding the easiest way to break into an organization. And that could be a phishing campaign by someone who specializes in doing that. Or it could be something else that basically gives threat actors the ability to buy access, like existing access to a lot of these systems where, these people barely know, in some cases, like who they're SIM swapping, or maybe in some cases they do go after people specifically, but the ability to turn around and instantly get value for completing like half of a crime. And basically being able to do either the easiest part or the part you're most specialized in, and then turn around and give that up to somebody who has the resources to develop zero-day vulnerabilities and just needs like a foothold within the network in order to make it work. That kind of ecosystem has made it, if you do have a zero-day vulnerability, it means that you can pay to have an impact. And that really used to be something where you would have to go out and deploy it yourself, or you would have to find a way in. Nowadays, the cybercrime ecosystem exists to just pay money to get access to a lot of different company accounts. And that's why, I think that zero-day vulnerabilities have a bigger impact now, because there's a better distribution channel for them that people can pay to access. Whereas before, you had to have all these resources to break in yourself.
And kind of my take on that is just purely from like a statistical standpoint. If you have more and more people joining the community and looking for exploits, you're going to find more and more 0 days and exploits. That being said, I do think a lot of people are joining as ethical hackers. And as we see more and more companies adopt bug bounty programs and that sort of thing, I think we will see more and more 0 days, but it'll be released through bug bounty programs and ethical means, and ultimately better the security of the entire landscape.
Stanley Lou asked, do you guys ever do bug bounties? I've been looking into doing it for supplemental income, and what are your thoughts? So I've talked to a lot of bug bounty programs, especially at like Bugcrowd or Hackeroni, aka HackerOne. And they have really good training and really good resources for people who want to get started with this. The one thing I would say is, it really depends on how much time you have to put into it. And it can be frustrating because a lot of the low-hanging fruit is often taken up by like people who have developed some sort of automation or can do scans really easily. But being able to train in a simulated or even sometimes real environment where you have permission to do certain things, I would say is rewarding in its own right. So if it gives you the ability to get paid while you're learning, it's kind of a nice job, because it gives you the ability to put some accomplishments under your belt. You can claim credit over some CVEs and like show off that you are an active researcher contributing to the community and that you've already done some work. And it really enables you to build a professional profile that somebody might be like, oh, wow, like I want to hire this person because, they're involved in this program. They've already knocked some really interesting things out. and they've done a good job at making some side income. So I see no downsides to it. I just wouldn't expect it to be the same income as like a full-time job. I would I would explain it to people as more like Uber. You know, like you have to put in sometimes a lot of work in order to get a regular return on it. And also there's going to be a bit of a curve at the beginning. So
can you do a DOS attack with a Raspberry Pi Zero 2W? Well, first of all, you can do any Wi-Fi attack as long as you're willing to put in an adapter, like a dongle. But I'm assuming you mean natively, and I'm not sure.
I think the answer is yes. So there's what's called the Nextmon patch that allows you to use the onboard Wi-Fi chip in attack mode. You can do arbitrary stuff, and you can indeed do like a deauthentication attack. So I believe the answer is yes. It'll be a little slow, but for the Raspberry Pi 0W, I know that you can. I don't know about the 2W. Like I don't know. I would have to check that one out. But previously on the Raspberry Pi 0W, it was possible, and in fact, it is kind of an awesome little attack platform if you're doing some relatively basic things that don't require brute forcing.
When does HackCat 2.0 get released?
So there's a new version of the board that we've been working on for a while, if that's what you're talking about, the new version of the Nugget. There's actually two. There's a surface mount version, and then there's also a version that has some additional like outputs and stuff for people who might be like learning programming, something like that. That's been on hold for a while, but you can expect to see it sometime next year.
Do you think we as hackers can contribute more by breaking stuff or talking about it, or is it both?
It depends on the stuff you're breaking. So if you're, for example, joining a bug bounty program, taking part in CTFs, and then talking about it, I think that that's the best outcome. Because frankly, if you keep this to yourself, you're not going to be able to learn from other people. And that's the best part about being in the hacker community is you get access to other people who are smarter than you. That should be exciting, not intimidating, because it allows you to eventually become more like them as you learn about them and as you learn about the way that they learn the sort of stuff and the way they apply it. So yeah, I would say that talking about it is a big goal. But if you're, just like attacking random people's stuff, then maybe don't go talking about it. So if the way that you learn is through cybercrime, then maybe leave out the second one. But otherwise, I would say if you can do challenges with other people, if you can discuss them with other people, like that's a really good way of learning how other people solve problems. And that is really essential for being good at this.
Hey, Zam's here.
Hey, good to see you, Zam.
So yes, we did see the Linus Tech Tips video on the rubber ducky.
Be honest, Michael, did you watch it?
Yeah, I watched the full thing.
Okay, cool.
So to answer James Randolph's question and your implied question, if you have been around this community and stuff, then I don't think that it's like necessary to watch it. While they go in some deep dive areas, it's more of, hey, this is the rubber ducky, what it can do, and they focus on the newest version of the rubber ducky and some of those features, but it's more just like a general informational type of video. So a lot of people in this community will know everything, but if you want to just go watch it for fun, it's great. And if you're maybe less familiar with it, then it's a great primer on like what the new rubber ducky can do.
Here's a question: how can I break out of a hacking chain? You should try a set of lockpicks. All right.
Okay.
So here's a question: what do you think? Why do you think many hacking groups are targeting universities such as Vice Society? So so there have been a lot of universities that are being targeted because, frankly, they have critical data. If you look at organizations that have data, it's going to be anything. Like a shipping company needs like their manifest and like to track shipments and to do payments. A university needs to do everything from making payments to staff members, to figuring out people's grades, to having all sorts of licenses and agreements with other companies. Like there's lots of critical data that you can hold for ransom. And frankly, some things cannot be replaced. So while like a company might be able to refer to backups or something, in a lot of cases, or even accept that the data is just gone, at a university, it can be the case where people can't continue on with their education and they've sunk lots of money into their careers. That's a really, really tempting thing to maybe give into the ransom, especially if the attackers have done their research and they know exactly how much the university can afford. So one thing that we're also seeing an increase in is targeted attacks where when they first get in, they go to financial data. They'll take the financial data and they'll send it to like an auditor, like an evil auditor, who will look through the books and figure out how much money they could reasonably afford. So when they actually do these ransoms, they're reasonably confident that the people who are receiving the ransom can actually pay it because they've already looked through their books. and they're sure that they have the money, and they're sure that the price that they're asking is actually something that the company can afford. So that's actually like increased their rates of success to make sure that they go through that extra layer of auditing and craft their initial ransom to something they know is reasonable versus just like picking a huge number.
Yeah, and tying into that, I think that's one of the reasons that universities and other educational institutions will get targeted by ransomware. Is because you got to remember these ransomware people are going for the lowest hanging fruit, and oftentimes education is underfunded or very tight budgets. So that means that they may not have the best security, especially smaller institutions or school districts. I had a question.
Yes, a criminal business consultation. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Is it possible to attack and sniff the traffic of GSM cell towers? Why are they uncommon? Yes, there is GMS sniffers you can get on GitHub that run on pretty
GMS or GSM?
GSM sniffers on GitHub that run on like $20 SDRs. That's going to be receive only, mind you. But yeah, so you can look at some of the traffic, but it's not going to work on 5G because the newer generations of cell towers are doing more encryption and doing more stuff to basically make it harder to track cellular devices without like government level programs and access. That's the short answer.
Yeah. So one question was about nugget stuff, so I feel qualified to answer. Does the USB and Wi-Fi nuggets both run Ducky scripts, one or two or both? So, all right, compound question. First, the Wi-Fi nugget is a Wi-Fi hacking tool that runs a bunch of different types of Wi-Fi hacking software, including Spacehoon's Deauthor and then Alex's Wi-Fi Invader. And yeah, so that is specifically focused for Wi-Fi hacking, and it does not run Ducky script because the chip inside of it does not support native USB. The USB nugget, like this one, does support native USB and runs Ducky script Classic, we're calling it, the original version of Ducky script. It currently doesn't support the new version because that one requires a custom compiler that we're going to have to build, and it's going to take some time. So we're focusing on fully implementing the original version of Ducky script first to make sure that all those features like changing keyboard layouts for different languages and being able to do loops and all that sort of stuff that's included in the original version of Ducky script, just making sure that those are included before we move on to adding extra bells and whistles. Because frankly, I think the original version of Ducky script works really well, and it's an excellent way of teaching beginners about programming. So that's why I'm really enthusiastic about supporting that one first before branching out into some of the new stuff.
Cool. So roadmap for intro hackers or people that want to become hackers. I think Kody and I have talked a lot about this before, but basically like choose a project that you're really passionate about or something that you want to learn to do, preferably with very specific goals. And then, start using that as a method to learn. So, maybe you want to write a program that does X, Y, and Z. And so you watch some basic programming tutorials in like Python. Python's a very approachable language. And then you go about trying to do that project. And as you do that, you use that as a vehicle to learn all these techniques for programming. That'll get you to the point at least where you know the questions that you need to ask, because sometimes that can be the challenge when you're first starting is you don't know what you don't know, right? And then from there, I strongly recommend things like CTF challenges and other courses. There are courses that you can take, and again, that can give you a good like foundation to start off from, and then focus in more on specifically what you're interested in. Because if you don't focus on what you're specifically interested in, then it's easy to procrastinate, be like, oh, well, I'll study this tomorrow. I want to go out to dinner with my friends or whatever, right? So when you're passionate about it, you're really going to focus on learning it a lot more.
To Stolen Lab. No, I don't mean to make light of your question. However, I don't know what a hacking chain is. You might need to restate the question because I don't know how to escape it if I don't understand exactly what it is. But for a generic regular chain, my advice does stand. All right, next question.
Yeah, give me a second. Yeah, so basically this is a comment on our old finding hidden spy cameras. And the person is commenting, this is why all the cameras in my house are wired.
Why do you have spy cameras in your house? What are you doing?
That's a very good question. But also I should note that that wouldn't help. That while that would help you from Wireshark detection via Wi-Fi, that would not prevent that hidden spy camera detector with the LEDs and the weird like lens.
That thing actually kind of ruined our episode because
Yeah.
we expected it to perform very poorly, and I had to like throw up a bunch of chaff basically to make
Mhm.
it harder for it to detect lenses, because it was super good at detecting lenses with that like red ring of LEDs. So for context, this episode we were comparing Wireshark against this like weird camera finder you can get off Amazon with a bunch of squid arms coming out of it. And like we figured out that it was actually pretty good
Mhm.
at like differentiating between a lens and like a piece of tape or something else that was designed to confuse Michael. So we managed to confuse him a little bit, but overall it did a pretty good job of being able to find the camera. And that was surprising because like, yeah, if you have Ethernet connected cameras, but it's still like, you know, like possible to see the lens like poking out of something, then yeah, one of those little like cheap Amazon detectors actually does a pretty
Mhm.
good job.
Best cybersecurity book. I don't know about particular book. Again, that's gonna depend on like what topic you're interested in. But No Starch Press has a lot of very good physical books that you can. And I think they also do the ebooks. But yeah, so definitely go check out their website. They have really cool cover art too. So that's No Starch Press.
Yeah, that would be something I would echo.
Um,
Someone else, it is a statement. ESP32 for 5 gigahertz. They actually released a chip that kind of does this. I need to remember what the exact chip name is, but part of the new ESP series actually has a 5 gigahertz chip. But you're not going to be able to do Wi-Fi hacking stuff with it yet, because unfortunately it is locked down from that kind of behavior. So you're going to have to do some sort of like sneaky workaround in order to get free packet writing, or like free just transmitting from that particular chip. But it is exciting to see. So yeah, that is a thing.
what can a hacker do with an IP address?
Um, you can scan it. You can look at all the services running on it. You can look at where it's been assigned historically. So like what has happened in the past with it using other services. You can also, in some cases, spoof it. So you can send traffic and identify the return address as that IP address. So you can like direct traffic back at it or cause attacks that like cause it to, I don't know, like look as though it's doing something and reflect traffic back at it. So there's a fair number of things you can do with an IP address. You can also get an approximate location. And if it's part of an organization like a university or a business, then you can identify that. Like, for example, if I check an IP address that's from my school's network, I can very easily identify which educational institution it's associated with and get a more approximate address than if I was working with like a private IP address. But that's pretty much it.
Okay, this goes back to the hidden spy camera video. What if you're not tech savvy? Most of the information here is overwhelming. So yeah, if you're not a tech savvy person, or you're trying to help your grandma or something who's very concerned about hidden cameras, the first thing I would say is just do basic groundwork. Like, don't stay at the cheapest Airbnb. Like, go to a reputable place, hotel, whatever. And then second of all, that lens detector we were talking about, it's like $50 or something on Amazon. And I think anyone that's capable of using a cell phone is capable of using it. It's like you turn on an LED and you look through a lens. It's not really that difficult to use.
Here's a question. Have I got my Flipper Zero yet? No, but I just got a notification that it is coming on the 18th. So that means I actually, depending on when it arrives, might have it by the next stream, like very possibly maybe. So if you want to see me unboxing the Flipper Zero, potentially, it should be arriving on Friday. So check out the Security Forward, that Security FWD channel on YouTube, and subscribe, and you'll see when we go live on Friday for our news stream.
What might be some practical, non-nefarious uses for the Wi-Fi coconut?
Network monitoring. So Kismet in particular works really well with the Wi-Fi coconut. So being able to take a look at all the different wireless devices around you, see what they're doing, which networks they've been part of in the past, which networks they've joined. Like, it really does give you a pretty good intelligence suite on all the networks around you and all the network behavior that's happening. You can keep track of clients and all sorts of other interesting things. So I would just say like Kismet would be my example.
Yeah, I kind of would echo that. Basically, using it as a monitor for things like deauthentication attacks could be a practical use. A little slightly gray area is the notion of like tracking devices that are around the area. I know a lot of like buildings got in shopping centers got in trouble for that a while back, as they were using like Wi-Fi to track where customers were in the building and who was coming and when.
Adam and I have the same date for delivery of our Flipper Zero. And Stan also asked if we can call our unboxing episode "Flipping Out." Yeah, I guess we can.
I
We
will
can
do that.
I'm honestly most excited about like the like RFID cloning and all that stuff. Like that's something that we haven't really touched. Like the Wi-Fi stuff, like we know a lot about that, but frankly, and the human interface device, like keyboard stuff, we know a lot about that too. But the radio stuff, that's really interesting. So I mean, one of those is also radio stuff, but you get what I mean. Like just being able to clone cards and do all that kind of cool stuff, like that seems really interesting and cool. And I'm really excited to get to play with that. Yeah, so it's going to be really exciting. And then also, someone asked if I got the Wi-Fi dev board, and yes, I did. I want to see what that's all about. They actually use the same chip that our USB Nugget uses. So if they've managed to do some interesting Wi-Fi stuff with it, I'm really interested to see. We'll have to see whether or not that is a thing. But yeah, so I should have the development board, and my hope is like maybe there'd be some sort of way to interface like our Nugget with like the Flipper and like give it some sort of Wi-Fi capability, since the chipsets seem to be compatible. But I guess we'll see. It's all very early to say.
Okay. What is best, Node MCU or Wi-Fi adapter for Wi-Fi hacking?
It depends on what you want to do. If it's basically Wi-Fi deauthentication and grabbing handshakes, then a wireless network adapter will, of course, let you do all those things, provided it supports, like Kali Linux and like works well with it. If you're talking about just something to do deauthentication attacks and you don't really care about doing like handshakes and cracking and stuff, then I would say the Node MCU, which runs an ESP8266 microcontroller, would allow you to do like a lot of like Wi-Fi attacks and even some Wi-Fi phishing attacks, but it's not going to be able to be quite as customizable as a wireless network adapter would be. Despite that trade-off, I still think it's a really good thing to get into because there's a lot you can do. And again, the only limitation is the ESP8266 can't grab handshakes because packets are truncated at a certain point if they're cut off. So the juicy part of the packet doesn't even get read by the microcontroller because for size constraints, it cuts off the packet and it doesn't even read past a certain point. So it's not able to grab Wi-Fi handshakes, unfortunately, which is the main limitation there.
I'm pretty sure someone has been remotely getting into my cellular phone. Can I catch them?
That is far too situation specific to answer. I don't know how wily you are, and I don't know how dumb they are. So I can't easily answer that question. Yes, it is technically possible for you to catch them. How would entirely depend on what the threat model was for how they were attacking your phone. I don't specialize in like mobile security, so that would be a more question maybe for like the EFF or something.
Yeah, well, some basic advice would be like, I don't know if it's Android or iPhone, but that sounds like a remote access tool, RAT. So go through, make sure that you recognize all the apps that are downloaded and installed on your phone, because it could possibly be a malicious app. So download, delete anything that you don't recognize or don't use on a regular basis. And then also, one of the tricky ways you can look for that sort of thing is with a power monitoring app. It can tell you if certain apps are drawing a lot of data or power, and that could be indicative of a breach of some sort.
Are there any interesting projects on Arduino, or is everything on the Raspberry Pi? So I've been actually really into like CircuitPython and MicroPython. And then when I was reading the Python and microcontrollers newsletter, I saw that Arduino is actually in Arduino Labs supporting MicroPython, which is pretty crazy to me. But they decided that they really like the language, and they think that the best way for people to experience would be through like their traditional like IDE and having it work through the system they've already established. So yeah, if you're interested in trying out MicroPython, then it seems as though it is now supported in Arduino Labs. It's in beta, of course. It's like not 100% guaranteed everything will work. But still, if you've been wanting to try it out, but you want to use the framework that Arduino makes available, then it's a pretty easy transition to try another programming language that might be a little bit more forgiving in some cases. And my hope is that by being brought over to Arduino, they'll be able to have like lots of libraries available and lots of people will contribute, and it'll be something that's really fun and easy for beginners. So I frequently program with CircuitPython just because the USB support's so great, and there's some websites that make it super easy to be able to use it. But I am really impressed to see that MicroPython is now supported on Arduino, at least in Arduino Labs. So that was really cool.
Okay, so here we have a question. Pop up. There we go. Wrong question. Anyway, are there any interesting projects on the Arduino platform, or are they all on the Raspberry Pi?
I just answered this.
Oh,
That was the
okay.
one we just answered.
Okay, sorry. So let's do the word list one. I know we answer that frequently.
Yeah. So when you get a hash of a password from like a Wi-Fi network, then you have a hash, and you need to run a bunch of possibilities through the same mechanism and see if you get the same number, which means you've gotten the correct result. So brute forcing is always the best way to do that. But frankly, like making sure that your password lists are derived from real passwords and maybe adding some permutations to beef up the list. And then using like a super fast server is usually the best way to do it, like via some sort of like cloud thing that you can rent for a relatively cheap amount of money. That would generally be the best way to go about it. If you have physical access, then things like the PNKID attack or pixie dust attack, like those things still work in some cases. But for newer devices that have better security, they won't work, and you'll be back to just trying to do a brute force attack. In which case, a word list is usually the shortest route to go. Of course, you can try to brute force an entire key space, but that's going to take a really long time or cost you some money on like an AWS instance, but frankly, not that much money. So yeah, unfortunately, like this traditional attack is still the best because people tend to just pick bad passwords. But if that's not the case, then a good old phishing attack is right next up there, where you can disrupt their network and create a fake network, convince them that the router is updating, and then get them to put in the real password in order to authenticate the update. Super easy and works really often against people who are not very well versed in how the router is supposed to work. So yeah, I would say that if you can't do something via brute forcing, then doing a phishing attack is a lot easier. We also demonstrated an episode on how you can just put this in a package and ship it, although shipping a LiPo battery is illegal.
This question kind of ties into that one, but I have a handshake file, but the word list does not contain the password. How can I solve this?
Get a bigger word list.
Get a big, okay.
Yeah, or start using something to generate prospective like passwords, like based on some seed words. There's some really good tools out there, for example, like taking words from the target's website if it's an organization, and then like creating a word mangler that adds like, you know, numbers and stuff to it and uses those as seeds. And of course, like a lot of companies will pick words that like reflect their like culture or values as a password. I've seen this happen many times before. Integrity, like 101 was like a password for an organization that I was like pen testing one time. So yeah, like there's a lot of reusing of bad passwords, and also just passwords that are derived from very common accessible things like the address of the business, the phone number of the business. So I find that often just using a tool that can like draw in words from a website and then use those as the seed of a good word list might be a good second step if your initial attacks with a word list don't work out. What are your thoughts on Flipper Zero? I can't wait to get one on Friday.
Okay, so this is a question about CircuitPython setup on the ESP32.
Okay.
Basically, they're saying when they try to connect to it, it says uploading sub, then it says error timeout. Anyone know why it's doing this?
Sounds like it's not being put into flashing mode. So there's two different modes for an ESP32S2, at least when it's based on the S2 mini module, which we use in our nuggets. So this goes back to the button that I was putting into it. There is a little button on the back here that you need to press down when you plug it in order for it to be put into flashing mode. So when it boots up, if this button's being held down, it'll boot up into flashing mode. You can also hold down the flash button and then hit the reset button, and it'll boot up into flash mode. Either way, that process will put it into flashing mode where you can write a new firmware image to it. If you don't do that, then it'll continue running whatever firmware image is on it, and it won't be listening for a new upload. So that would be my number one thought. Second would be, well, if it's seeing it and it's getting that message, then your USB cable should be fine. So just make sure that it's being properly put into flash mode, because that's the number one issue I see in that space.
So this person's getting a new laptop and they're wondering about our thoughts on using a Linux laptop. So unpopular opinion here,
Okay.
but I'm not a huge fan of Linux laptops unless it's just like specifically for coding and hacking and that sort of stuff. Like if you're talking like a general daily driver laptop, like, you know, check and see, do you want to play video games ever? Do you want to do like a bunch of video editing and those sorts of things? Like think about those sorts of things carefully before you dive down the Linux rabbit hole. Mind you, you can dual boot and you have other options there, but just something to keep in mind.
I'm gonna adopt this response by Zam wholesale. I think that this is the best advice. I'm partial to ThinkPads. The T series has awesome Linux support, although almost all machines offer fairly good support. Frankly, like ThinkPads are great. You can get them for a really decent price, and you can get great hardware compared to what you can get for the same dollar for most other places. Frankly, there's so many fleets of them that are pretty well maintained that whenever those fleets are, like rotated out or given up, then you can find really, really cheap ones online. And yeah, that's where I get a lot of the computers that I work with doing Linux. So that would be my recommendation.
What are our thoughts on the Flipper Zero? Well, we don't have it yet. Kody's going to get it possibly by Friday.
I'm really excited. I think it's really cool, and I can't wait to try out the RFID cloning and like some of the other like radio stuff that it does. I think that's I want to clone my garage door opener because I lose it all the time. So there's a lot of like very practical things that I think I could do with it that will just like make my daily life better, and that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, that's called going to like Home Depot and getting like the $20
one device to rule it all. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to be able to clone my key card. I want to be able to open my garage. I want to be able to do all this stuff from one device. We'll see if it delivers.
That's actually where I'm really looking forward to, like ultra wideband being more widely adopted, and kind of the idea that your phone will have ultra wideband on it, and then all these devices will too. So like just as you walk up or as you drive up to your garage door, it would just automatically open as it recognizes you coming towards it. Like I can't wait for that. So James Randolph left a question. Why don't you utilize the community tab on YouTube? That would be a great place to post updates like maker events you do.
The what? I didn't know this existed.
That's why.
Yeah. So like, yeah, no, I will do that. I just like honestly forgot about it. We use Twitter as like the way we were announcing most of our stuff, and like, yeah, I've never even looked at it, to be honest. Do you guys look at it? If everybody looks at it, then yeah, we can absolutely start using that. But I frankly forgot it existed because
yeah, put in the comments if you know this exists. Like I knew it existed, but like I think it's been around for years and years now, and I've always never seen anything on any channel about it. So I've just kind of ignored it. But if that is something people actually check, and it, I'm assuming, gives you notifications, then we can certainly start doing that. Most of our events we put on Meetup, so that's been the platform we've used for that. But I can definitely see the appeal of posting it on YouTube as well. And also, we have a comment here that Vim is worse than Nano. Do we have any opinions on Vim versus Nano?
But I will answer this question from Adam. What shirt is this? So I showed up at the Hackaday SuperCon in Pasadena a day and a half late, so I got a size XXL t-shirt, but it's very comfortable and it's nice to sleep in. And if I wash it a couple times, maybe it will actually fit me. But yeah, this is from the Hackaday SuperCon. Very cool. I love the design, and it was a really cool conference. It was too bad because I was working the first day, so I didn't get to go to anything except the social event at night, which was awesome. Then the second day I poked around, but I was kind of getting a sore throat. And by day 3, I was like absolutely not going to be around people. My voice was gone. I was clearly sick. I didn't want to get anybody else sick. So I missed the workshop that actually I went back to participate in. But fortunately, Alex was able to do the workshop, even though I think he was also losing his voice as well. And yeah, it ended up being really fun. But yeah, I highly recommend checking out Hackaday SuperCon if you haven't already. I had a really great experience, and I know a lot of other people did too, and I got to meet some really cool people there.
Yeah. I will just say on the Vim Nano debate, I once had to follow a tutorial that used Vim in it, and that was when I was first starting hacking, and I couldn't even figure out like how to close out of Vim. So yes, Nano is by far my preferred one. All right, next question. I think we're all out of the pre-prepared.
Good. Questions. So, by the way, if you're watching this on repeat, or if you have a question that hasn't been answered, by the way, I saw the question about stopping distributed denial of service attacks. I have no idea. I'm not Cloudflare. You should probably talk to Cloudflare because they specifically provide protection against DDoS, and that's usually like if you're hosting like a service or a website or something. So like I don't know what infrastructure you're using. So frankly, like I attack stuff. I'm not a defender. I'm not really the best person to ask about that. But I did see your question, and I appreciate it. And if you have a question that hasn't been answered, you can feel free to leave it on our YouTube video, specifically on the security forward one is the one we check first. But if you leave it on Hack 5, we'll see it as well, and we'll make sure to answer it on the next Q&A stream.
Yeah, and along those lines, if we don't get to your question that's in the chat, make sure to put it in the comments on the video, because that's what I check. I don't actually go back and scroll through the chat for every previous live stream. So the comments is what I look at. And so we have talked about previously how Signal is doing away with SMS support. Do you have any platforms you plan to transition to or you're interested in using?
Oh, no, not yet. I am looking for suggestions, though. So if you're in the chat and you're moving, I think somebody mentioned that they were moving to Session or something like that. But yeah, if you have a platform that you're moving to from Signal because they are dropping SMS support and making it much more difficult to continue to use it as a single point of contact for all your contacts, and also keep, your text database like encrypted. I think that that's a really nice feature. Yeah, if you've got a suggestion, please reach out, let us know, because I'm currently still looking for one, and I know there's a lot of thoughts out there about which one is best. Oh my gosh, people are raging in the comments about like Vim versus Nano. I will say one of our current software developers for the USB Nugget used to just carry around this ridiculously huge like Vim profile that allowed him to just instantly set it up as like a development platform that was like customized like to an absolute T. Although I think he no longer does that, but he was notorious for just like using Vim, but only if it was customized to his exacting specifications, which was insane. But I mean, what are you gonna
do? Okay, so I want to become a hacker pen tester. I know I need to learn a programming language. Which to learn? Any tips? I honestly recommend starting out with Python. That's a very approachable, relatively human readable language, and it'll get you pretty far. And there's a lot of tutorials and support for that.
So if you want to be a pen tester, I would say the things you need to learn about are maybe a little bit of programming. That's nice, but honestly, networking is going to give you more understanding of the pre-made tools that you're probably going to be using more often than writing your own proof of concepts. I was able to function learning other tools and figuring out how they worked in a process. So like all the different steps to do a pen test and which tools are used and what the results mean and what to do about each one. I felt a little weird at first, like using the tools without understanding all the underlying machinery. But after using them and watching videos about them and whatnot, like I really learned a lot about them and ended up being able to be comfortable using them. And that taught me about like attack flows and all that stuff. So when I went back to school and I learned a little bit about C++ and I learned a little bit about networking, I found the networking stuff answered more of the questions about what was going on from a security context than the programming classes did. So I agree. I think that C++ is good for learning about computer science and discouraging yourself from going down that path any further. And Python is very fun for creating proof of concepts. But neither one of them are strictly necessary. I think Linux skills and IT skills are probably, and I mean, networking skills are just as important, if not more important, to being a pen tester, personally.
Yeah, I realize we're absolutely wrong. It's Fortran that they should be learning first, because that's the most applicable language.
Whoa.
No, it's actually funny that some places still use that.
All right, so this is a question. It's Nugget related. Could the Nugget be used as a mobile tripwire for alerts on Kismet/Pineapple/Coconut around in the areas we're moving through, like a proof of concept? So it is capable of reading packets in real time and filtering them and beginning to do some interesting stuff with that. So it's like a passive tool for like detecting, for example, karma attacks, like probe frames coming up and then like a new network spawning up in response to that. Or even like putting out probe frames and then seeing if, an impossible network spawns up because there's a pineapple nearby. I think that would be totally possible. It wouldn't be able to detect a coconut because a coconut is completely passive and it's not outputting anything. But it could kind of act like a single coconut, or like a single radio in the coconut on a single frequency, but it would still only have one radio, so it would need to kind of pop around. So the USB Nugget does have, like, under the hood, the capability of doing some pretty interesting stuff with Wi-Fi. And if you wanted to work with the ESP32S2 directly in like Arduino and write software for it, it would be able to do all sorts of interesting proof of concepts. And even in CircuitPython, I think it would be possible to do something like that, to like put out probe requests and then end up seeing if that sort of network pops up in response. So that's the easiest way to detect like a Wi-Fi pineapple. running a karma attack, which is like usually on by default. So that's how I would build a proof of concept to try to detect like a malicious device. I would like pretend to be a device that's seeking out a network, and then see if something out there creates that network back in response to this network I just, came up with.
And we're getting close to the end of time. So if you'll have any final questions, be sure to drop those in the chat.
Oh my God, I love this. USB Nugget watch. So I came up with the idea for the Wi-Fi Nugget because I wanted to take the qualities I thought were really interesting about the Deauthor wristwatch and make it into like its own educational platform. So I really liked, of all the different iterations of the Deauthor, I thought that the wristwatch was probably one of the more interesting ones. So I wanted to create something that was basically taking all the best elements of that and then making it into its own product. Because I thought, people aren't actually going to wear this as a wristwatch really, unless they're on an engagement. And even then, like it has a pretty limited series of parameters that it's useful for. But I did like the fact that it exposed most of the useful functions via just buttons and a screen. So I wanted to make something that kind of followed along with that, but also had like the web interface and other things that would be helpful for people who wanted to go a step further. So probably not going to do a Nugget wristwatch because the ears would poke you. It's a little sharp.
It's a self-defense tool.
I mean, it can be, yeah. If it's on your keychain, it's a self-defense tool. But probably not going to do that because actually it is derived from a design that was that I observed and really liked on a wristwatch hacking tool. So yeah, that's its like mom. That's one of its parents or grandparents.
So James Randolph is commenting that he wants a Lime SDR to be added to the Coconut. Yeah, I would love to see more like SDR products that are multiple coherent SDRs. So like the Kraken SDR, so that way you can do radio direction finding and those sorts of things. And also like, I don't know, I just have some weird obsession with wanting to see like the entire radio spectrum all at once and just like be able to record it. I think that would be really cool and fun. I recognize that would use a lot of data.
Wow, there's so many good. Everybody comes up with the best questions right when we're about to run out of time. USB Nugget belt buckle, maybe. Hey, there you go. Yeah, that would be very Western of us. I would like that. Yeah. I have legacy security cameras that require 2.4 gigahertz to set up. Should I pitch them? I will say anybody would have the ability to kick those security cameras offline. So if they're covering something that you really don't want somebody who has, I don't know, a Wi-Fi Nugget or a Deauthor wristwatch to be able to just kick right off the internet and make it so it's not transmitting anymore, provided it has an SD card backup, then like maybe that's fine because you could still retrieve the footage, but you wouldn't have real-time access anymore. And that could be a deal breaker if you do have a security camera that just runs on 2.4 gigahertz.
Yeah. I was going to say, if we end up going to Wild West Hack and Fest, we'll definitely make a belt buckle version of the Nugget just for that. Is there a known method to recover data on storage formatted with zero filling and so on and so forth? As far as I know, no. Maybe if it wasn't written over properly multiple times, you might be able to like physically extract like spinning disk or the solid state memory and put it in another device and analyze that. But that would be physical access, a very time consuming, expensive process.
Okay, so somebody was asking a very niche question, which is it possible to SSH remotely without direct access to a router, let's say public Wi-Fi at one location and public Wi-Fi at another location? Yeah, so there was like something that was called a kite where you would basically like have a third-party server sitting in the middle. You would have one device like expose its like temporary IP address as one part of the link, and then a second device that would like go to the other side of the tunnel, and it would act as a little tunnel in the cloud that would connect these two ends together. So yeah, that was one way that I've seen it done, and particularly people like to do this sort of thing for like a Raspberry Pi. And that can be one of the ways that you can enable like a simple like SSH connection to be able to do something that's sitting at the other end. Of course, this is also used by like pen testers or somebody who's left a Raspberry Pi in a place where they're not supposed to be. I hope that's not you. But if it is, then yeah, this is a pretty good idea because it would be able to establish that kind of communication.
Yeah, I was going to say along those lines, keep in mind that the firewall rules of the public Wi-Fi probably aren't going to like allow any kind of port forwarding or anything. So you might have to use like some kind of other like VPN tunnel. Like you're going to have to do something to get around those firewall rules.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. Yeah, there is good communication at least one way using DNS, but again, this is only one way, and that's only so reliable on some of these like open Wi-Fi networks. Alex recently did some interesting research on being able to send information encoded as DNS request to any open Wi-Fi network, even if it has like a default captive portal on it and doesn't let you actually access data until you sign in, but that doesn't exactly apply here.
Cool. Well, I think we are basically out of time here.
Yeah, so thank you to everybody for asking your great questions.
Mhm.
It's always really cool to be able to just interact with people, get questions from some of our videos, and also about some of the technologies that we specialize in and some of the things that we also don't. So if we didn't answer your question about like certification, it's because I have none. So I don't really feel particularly qualified to answer those questions. But if you have any other questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today, then make sure to drop it either on the Hack 5 YouTube channel or on the Security Forward, that's Security FWD. And make sure to join us on Friday on the Security Forward channel, where we will be going through the hacking news, probably with Michael as our guest. So you can maybe expect some cryptozoology thrown in as well. Thank you to everybody who has been sticking with us through these streams. And also somebody asked how they can pay us to hang out for an extra hour. I mean, we'll find a way. It's cool. Maybe we'll do like a little nugget class or something, because we've been doing a lot of educational content around that, and it's frankly been really fun to get people's feedback. So if you have any thoughts on the new button we've been creating, or if you have any other thoughts on that, please feel free to let us know. And of course, a big shout out to Varonis for sponsoring all of this. If you like this stream, make sure to check out all of their educational materials, because frankly, they let us do a lot of really cool stuff. And they've discovered some really interesting vulnerabilities this year, some of which we've made some cool TikTok videos about on our TikTok account, which is Hackbyte, HAKBYTE. Wow. Okay. Anyways, so that's all we have for this episode. Thank you very much to everybody who joined us, and we will see you next time. Bye.